I think not in cruelty. I think in methods. Another entry by Jack the Ripper's Hand. The Fictional Diaries of Jack the Ripper.
The Scent of Tallow and Lye, England, 1863. Chapter 1. The Morning Chemistry. The morning smelled of work before anyone spoke it aloud. In the kitchen, the air hung like cloth, forgotten too long over hot water. Tallow, lye, a breath of wet wood growing soft at the edges. Whoever has boiled soap knows that scent is a form of truth. It announces what hands will do long before they know it themselves. Scraping, stirring, wringing, carrying water that takes more than it gives. Mother arranged things as though deploying soldiers. Pot, ladle, bowl, cloth. The sequence mattered, not the drama. I had the task of fetching water and sifting ash until it was fine enough to slip through fingers like dust of thought. Lye is a polite name for transformation. It makes of fat something that renders the world habitable again. And it tells with caustic honesty that purity is a chemical question, not a moral one. I watched the water as it began to roil, saw how the fat sought the point where it forgot its nature and surrendered to the stirring. Mother had the gaze of clockmakers when she stood at the pot. A quiet counting, a waiting, a yes at the proper moment. Not too early, not too late. She said, else the world sticks fast to the world. I understood this quite literally. Things must be able to release if one wishes to use them again. In the corner lay the tallow remnants from last winter, a scent that breathed like an animal in the stillness. We rendered it down, and I noted how fat lies upon water when it decides to become someone else. First islands, then a film, then gleam. The ladle described its circle, and the circle became a clock that measured not time but state. When the ladle returned heavier, the moment had arrived. We added the ash lye, and the pot answered with that dull exhale that made the kitchen briefly silent. The soap did not arise, it yielded. One saw it at the edges, where separations ceased, and a new order began bearing the dirt of others. Mother did not say good. She merely tested with the spoon whether the trace upon the surface held. When the trace held, so did the day.
Oh, where are my manners? My name is Grimwick. And that was just one page of tonight's diary.
Chapter 2. The Lexicon of Stains. I learnt to distinguish stains. Grease, soot, tallow, grass, wine, blood. They speak differently. Soot tells of air that has seen too much. Grass of fall and play. Wine lies about joy. Blood tells nothing. It insists. With blood one conducts conversations that need no words. Lye knows long before people know how to take from fibers what should not dwell there. I held cloth against the light, turned it, read the warp and weft like a map showing roads and crossings. When one knows the direction in which a thread gives, the world is easier to persuade. Washing day had a rhythm. The water rumbled, the hearth answered. The tongs spoke when iron struck iron. Outside, footsteps tramped the yard as though they had arranged a parade. I heard all this and ordered it into rows. 4 buckets, 6 stirrings, 12 breaths until the foam grew quiet. I liked this part, because it belonged to mathematics and not to moods. Mother let me soak the sheets of a trader from the village. They were heavy, not only from dirt but from the habit of being used. I laid them in the water and saw how the edge lost its color that has no name, the between of gray and something. I pressed, I lifted, I released. The foam hissed politely when it fled over the rim. Later, when everything hung, The wind spoke with cloth in a tone that only washing knows. A lesson about patience and direction. I conducted experiments. A scrap of cloth no one would miss, 2 fingers wide. I drew lye across blood that I knew. Not from drama, but from a tear on my thumb that split whilst carrying wood. Warm washes better than hot. Rubbing is virtue only when the thread can bear it. I noted where pressure lies. I noted that time is an aid when one supervises it. Chapter 3. The Art of Small Deaths. Towards midday, I carried the kettle to the yard. The steam had transformed the kitchen's scent of tallow and soap into a weariness that made everything equal. Outside, the air breathed anew. I poured the water into the channel, where it met cold stones with a small, honest sound, and thought of how things go away. Going is movement. Away is property. Dirt goes. Some things become away. The neighbor brought fowls, not as gift, as work. "Since you're cooking and washing anyway," he said, laying 3 creatures upon the bench. Their eyes still saw the world, but no longer for themselves. Mother made the price quietly. I made the work quietly. 1 cut, brief, so the blade works rather than the hand. Warm, the color emerged. Ferrous, immediate. I counted to 3, ordered my breath, let the channel do what it was built for. The skin yielded when one lifted it, where sinews hesitate. Feathers retain their will even when the creature surrenders it. One must stroke them, so they return. I think not in cruelty. I think in methods. That is the difference between appetite and work. Who works grows calm, and who is calm hears. One hears the moment when a body releases what it wished to hold. One hears it in the small change of tone when fiber becomes surface. The neighbor's fowls taught me much about the architecture of small deaths. Each bird required a different approach, not from sentiment, but from anatomy. The cockerel's neck was thick, requiring confidence. The hen's more delicate, their vertebrae like small coins, easily separated if one found the proper angle. I discovered that speed served kindness better than hesitation. Chapter 4. The Science of Cleansing. The afternoon brought its own lessons. A merchant's wife arrived with garments bearing the archaeology of daily life. Wine and wax and something that might have been blood or beetroot. I smelled, I estimated. Wine is water that tells stories, only not always the truth. Wax is stubborn. One takes it with cold, not heat. Blood is honest when fresh. Older, it becomes like lived lies. I worked it place by place, edge by edge. I worked from outside inward, not reverse. Thus one denies resistance the chance to become edge. When I finished, the garment was not new, but it was wearable again. Wearable is the world's goal. New is presumption. Each stain demanded its own conversation. Wine responded to salt and patience. The salt drew out moisture. Patience allowed time to complete what technique began. Wax required the opposite strategy. Cold to harden it, then careful scraping with the blade's edge, working always with the weave rather than against it. The mysterious dark stains, whether blood or beetroot, surrendered to cold water first, then lye, then more cold water. I began to understand that cloth, like flesh, had grain and direction. Working against the weave was like cutting across the muscle. Possible, but wasteful, leaving rough edges that invited further problems. The wise approach was to study the structure first, find the natural lines of division, then follow where the material wished to part. Chapter 5. The Philosophy of Steel. Father entered, laid the knife from Sheffield upon the table, and regarded the soap as though examining work. He took a piece, weighed it in his hand, nodded. "Sharpness is a decision," he said, as though speaking of soap making. I did not answer. In some sentences lies sufficient work. One need not extend them. When darkness came, the washing hung in the yard like flags of an invisible country. The wind performed its service, and the ropes said nothing about it. I stood a while among them, drew fingers across the hems, and imagined each was a sentence that ended today. Order is the sound things make when they stop hurting. I held the sound until it grew quieter. Later, when the kitchen had breath again, I sat at the table and read my hands. Lie leaves an alphabet. Small hardnesses over the knuckles. Pale lines where once was skin. The weariness between thumb and forefinger where pressure dwells. I imagined that cities too might be read thus. Alleys as fingers, markets as joints, courtyards as palm scars that, when rubbed, tell stories. One must only listen long enough until the wood answers. At the pump, water remained standing, smooth as glass. I saw my face, not clearly, but sufficiently to know that truth remains a question of light. I thought that cleaning and cutting are relatives who seldom visit. Both take away what no longer belongs. One dissolves, the other separates. Both want peace. Coldness does not lie. Chapter 6. The Anatomy of Small Things. The rat trap clicked late. I was in the chamber beneath the stairs, because the house makes its most honest sounds there. The creature was fresh, warm, its tail a wet rope. Work. I took the blade. Brief. Calm. The skin yielded where it should. Scent, immediate, ferrous, small, no spectacle. I placed 2 fingernails at the edge, lifted the cover of fur, ordered what lay within into the drawers of sight. Sinew, muscle, small wheels of cartilage that object but not long. Afterwards, soap, water, peace. The rat provided excellent instruction in miniature anatomy. Its organs were precisely arranged, each fitting its designated space with no waste, no confusion. The heart, when I found it, was hardly larger than a peppercorn. Yet it had driven the entire mechanism with admirable efficiency. The liver was dark and dense, the kidneys paired like small beans. Everything had its place, its purpose, its proper connection to the whole. I began to appreciate the elegance of internal architecture, how blood found its channels, how breath moved through passages designed for exactly that purpose. The body was a factory of remarkable sophistication, yet one that could be dismantled with surprising ease when one understood its construction principles. This knowledge seemed applicable beyond rats. All creatures, I reasoned, followed similar architectural plans, merely scaled upward, made more complex, but operating on the same fundamental principles. Find the proper lines of connection, apply pressure at the correct angles, and even the most elaborate mechanism would yield its secrets. Chapter 7. The Ledger of Understanding. That night, I dreamed of words that could be washed. One set them upon paper, let them soak, then rubbed gently across the sheet, and they disappeared without the fiber tearing. I woke thinking, paper is cloth, cloth is skin, skin is memory. And all 3 bear stains one must know to use them further. Before sleep, I placed a piece of soap beside the bed, a white rectangle with edges that did not quarrel. It smelled of work and order. I held it until warmth made it slip. That sufficed. The soap making had taught me about transformation, how one substance could be convinced to become another through the application of proper technique and timing. Lye converted fat into something useful, just as heat converted raw flesh into nourishment, just as sharp steel converted connection into separation. All of these were merely different expressions of the same principle. The world was malleable for those who understood its rules. I thought of London, that great city I had never seen, but heard described by travelers. Surely it too was a place where materials waited for proper handling, where the right touch, applied at the correct moment, could work transformations beyond anything possible in our small village, where one could practice techniques learned in washing and soap making on a grander scale, with more interesting subjects. The ledger I kept in my mind grew more detailed with each passing day. Not words. Words could be misunderstood, misremembered. Numbers were more honest. Angles, pressures, timing, temperatures, the mathematics of materials and their proper handling. Tomorrow would bring other stains. Today I had learnt that cleaning is a method that makes the world quieter, and that silence sometimes is the only thing that remains when all has been done that was necessary. Order is the sound things make when they stop hurting. Tonight that sound is very quiet indeed.
I trust you enjoyed this glimpse into a most curious diary. If so, leave behind a small token of your delight with a like, and do consider joining our circle by subscribing. And remember, ring the little bell, and you shall be the very first to know when another diary or a fresh entry emerges from the shadows. And if a whisper stirs in your mind, a thought, a riddle, perhaps a name of someone whose secrets you would dare to uncover, leave it for me below. I read them one by one. And who knows, your wish may guide my hand to the very next diary I choose from my collection.